Wow, 600 people, packed audience, tickets sold out. It's amazing. Green hats, we're getting one after. And we're super lucky because we get to be the people to kick off Casey and Kevin's first Hard Fork Live event. So we're going to set the stage for you for this evening, which promises to be something that's smart, fast-talking. It's Casey and Kevin, and definitely memorable. So with me, I have David Cox. He is Vice President of AI Models at IBM and Director of the MIT-IBM Watson AI Lab that drives cutting-edge research that's reshaping the future of AI and models. Before IBM, he was a professor in science and engineering at Harvard and also holds a PhD in neuroscience. So, you can ask him any topic. But better than that, he used to be a lounge pianist in his early days before Harvard and AI. And it just seems appropriate for our venue tonight. And when we were backstage, there's a piano, and David played for us. So all kinds of things can happen today. And trust me, Kevin and Casey have an amazing evening planned. So with that, let's just get started. David,
Sure.
Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
One of the things you've been talking about is that bigger models is not always better, and very often it's smaller models that'll drive the future. It's a little contradictory to the way we look at things in Silicon Valley, where large is better and we need to disrupt everything. So talk to us a little bit about your thinking there and what IBM is doing.
Yeah, well, I think in AI today, everything is exciting, right? Everything is super exciting. It's so exciting that if you work in the field, it gets stressful. But I think it really organizes down into sort of two poles of the universe, which aren't necessarily contradictory, but there's one camp that's driving towards human-level intelligence. We want to, or super intelligence, right? We want to build AI systems that are, like us, that can think like us, have motivations, that can think better than us. And then there's another point of view, which is this is a tool. This is software. This is something that we can use. It makes us better at what we do. It takes away the drudgery of work. We're used to tools. And I think that's a big divide because it's not clear that we need systems that can think or even like feel emotion or any of these things to be able to do the work you want to do. And the founder of Hugging Face had a quote I like, which is basically, when things start working, you call them software, to paraphrase. And I think there's this sort of divide in the world, and where we're looking at this is, how do we weave this into everything we do? How do we make it invisible? And on one hand, that's a little bit of a killjoy thing, and I'm sorry, we're the guys with the suits and the ties. We want to take away all your fun. But it's actually something better than that, because think about the internet when it first came out, and it's now invisible. We just know that we have the world's information in our pockets. It just becomes ubiquitous. And on one hand, this like quest for human-level intelligence, it drives us in a variety of kind of maybe problematic places. That huge amounts of energy are going there. It's very expensive. It's very hard to balance the costs of AI sometimes against the returns of AI. So what we're looking for is how do we make these really effective, really fit to purpose, customizable, and a big part of that is also making them open so everybody can engage with these things.
Talk a little bit about open versus closed source, because there have definitely been more or less more religious battles on this than I've ever seen in my career. So let us know, how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, we're huge proponents of open. We always have been. And if you look at the internet, if you think back, there was a moment in time where the entire internet might have been running on Windows. And there was a real battle for that territory, and ultimately, as we all know, Linux won, Open won, and why would that be? It's because when everybody can contribute and everyone can be represented, everyone can make their own version of something. That's just a really powerful thing. And even some of the initial things that people were worried about, like security, like oh gosh, if it's open, everyone's going to be able to hack it or something. Turns out it's 180 degrees the other way. All of the major cyber attacks that we've had have been on proprietary software, because there's not nearly as many eyes on it. So we think that having an open ecosystem, it's an unbeatable thing in the long run. It's really hard to beat the collective, talent and imagination of everybody, and the ability to customize it for what you want to do, the ability to see it and understand it. And that's a really, I think something that just can't be stopped. And we're not alone in that. We started an AI alliance co-founded with Meta, where we're really trying to foster those ecosystems of people contributing in the open.
But do you see the AI world being a lot different from that Unix Windows world? Because now it feels like it's more of a country issue, right? Like countries are having their own sovereign models. So where do you see open and close kind of come there?
Yeah, and I think there's maybe in this moment more than any other, there is a lot of suspicion of having reliance on any one player, and especially when you talk about nation states. Like, you know, does everyone want to be dependent on any one country's, you know, model? So a lot of countries are actually working, we've been working with some of them, to build their own sovereign models. Like you want to have a model that's in your jurisdiction, fully under your control, fully you can trust. And that's very hard to do outside of an open source ecosystem, because it's just, you can't trust necessarily something proprietary in your supply chain. So that's another force that's certainly driving this trend.
It's a good point, because India has its own, Japan has its own, France has its own. You went back to talking about AI, and when we were talking about it, sometimes you kind of go, well, AI is not the digital god we all think it's going to be. It's more of a tool versus a god. Whereas a lot of people like to look at it as, oh my God, AI is going to take over the world, and we should all be changing around it. You seem to have a different view on it. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is an almost religious fervor in some corners, like, you know, and there's even like Rocco's basilisk. Have you guys heard about Rocco's basilisk? This idea that there will be a super intelligent AI in the future, and if you don't support it, it will know, and it doesn't matter if you're dead yet, because it'll resurrect you digitally and torture you. And it's like, I did not imagine I would be part of these conversations when I was doing my PhD at MIT at like however old I was. It was just like, it was such a disreputable field. Actually, I was studying neural networks back when that was like something that people who weren't serious, you know, studied. And now here we are, and Rocco's basilisk has it for us all. Yeah. But you know, I think that just distracts, right? This is a tool. I mean, I have a positive view of technology. I think you probably all do too. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here wearing all your green hats. You're interested in technology. It's exciting. It makes everything better for humanity. But that doesn't mean it has to be something more than a tool. Tools like getting work done more easily, being able to do more, being able to, you know, cut costs and have new opportunities for businesses. Like that's all great, and technology is just terribly fun. The idea, though, that it's going to, you know, alter the course of history, and I mean, it will, but not in a sort of a, you know, the super intelligence comes and it has this kind of religious quality to it. I don't think that's needed for it to be exciting, and I don't think it's also productive for what we need to do next. To use it responsibly, to focus in on what do we need to do to be able to responsibly, you know, safely, securely deploy AI to help everything we want to do.
To go to that point, what does a responsibly open AI structure mean to you, and what is IBM doing in that area?
Yeah, so open is interesting because there's actually there's certainly open weights. There's actually a spectrum of open, I guess is what I want to say. There are the traditional sense of open source is everything you need to make the software, the code, is available in the open. Today, open models actually can mean lots of different things. So one of these large language models is really just a big pile of numbers at the end of the day, like billions of numbers, big bag of numbers, and a little bit of software around it to orchestrate, you know, math with those numbers. And how you got those, you can be open with the numbers. I'm just going to put these numbers on the table. I'm not going to tell you where they came from, but there they are, and you can use them. That's great. That's open weights models. And then there's a step back where we actually tell you what's in the data. And surprisingly, that's not the standard. That's actually quite uncommon that the vendor of a model will even tell you what data they use to train the model. And these things are kind of like, you know how they say you are what you eat? That's kind of what these things are. They are the data that they've been trained on. So I think, you know, on one hand, we have proprietary vendors who won't even tell you what the numbers are or how it works or what data they use. We have open weights models where they give you the numbers, but they won't tell you how they got them. Right. And then you have another level of, like, we're actually going to be transparent about these things. And, you know, there have been many, you know, debates and concerns about models coming from certain countries that also, like, you know, maybe there's something in the numbers that either the model won't talk about certain topics, or you can even poison a model. You can actually have models that will have negative behaviors that are triggered in very specific settings, and you would have a hard time knowing that if you just had just this big pile of numbers. So we think that ultimately it's going to have to be much more transparent. We have to tell our customers what every piece of data we use, we can trace that back. For regulated industries like banks and insurance, this is pretty important, because if you get denied insurance, you want to know why that happened. And well, there's a pile of numbers. We found it on the internet, and the numbers told us to do this. That's a weird argument. So right. we think that there needs to be more transparency. I think we're going to mature into a place where that happens. But it's very much right today, this is an open battlefield. This is an open debate. We don't know which side's going to win. But we think we have to get there, because people need to know what's in this thing if it's going to be one of the new electricity. If this is going to be a utility, we need to know what's inside.
So I realize what you're doing. How do you get to convince other people to be doing the same thing?
It's a great question. Well, I mean, so we form alliances. So we have over 100 different academic institutions, companies, hardware providers. Basically, every part of the ecosystem, we formed this alliance that was co-founded with Meta, just to foster and encourage these kinds of things. Now, there are people who would tell you that the proprietary models are an inevitability. They're gonna win, and the sort of fervor, the news beat that happened, there was a lot of interest and excitement and consternation about DeepSeek when it came out, because that was a Chinese company that had arrived with a model that seemed to be punching at very much the same. Right. Yeah, very much, and it was completely open, but open coming from a place that I think for different reasons people might have concerns with or might not have expected. They've been building great models for a long time, and I think that that kind of dispelled the notion that there was this impenetrable moat around this space. So I think what this does, it just says that this community it's really a sign of how powerful the community is, because they can take ideas that are produced all over the world, we can take ideas from what they produced, and we can put those together, and that's an unstoppable force. And if we can do that together with transparency and with clarity of what's inside, that's going to be just a huge benefit for all of humanity.
That's a really good point. You at IBM have new releases of Granite 4.0 coming out, and we talk about compute efficiency, and we're talking a little bit about that, and also the power that's needed. Do you think compute efficiency is going to be the new benchmark for AI?
I think it's going to be one of them. So we have a series of models that we produce called Granite. They're basically made for business, right? Because you want to have an HR chatbot, you want to have a supply chain sort of agent. They're built to do that. And I would argue that it's not important if your HR chatbot knows advanced physics. I think we could all agree that advanced physics doesn't really enter into the needs for an HR chatbot. But to get really the absolute best performance on that kind of task, you need to have an enormous model, or you need to spend a huge amount of time training it. Now, the energy that goes into training these things, the amount of compute that goes into training these things is growing. It's astronomical, really. So, and if you didn't know, by some estimates, by the year 2040, if our computing use grows year over year as it is growing today, we will exceed the power budget of the planet Earth. So there just won't be enough stuff to dig up out of the earth.
That's why Elon's taking us to Mars. It'll happen in that time.
The natural resources on Mars aren't so great, actually. And we'll leave aside the energy cost to get us to Mars. That's
good point.
And it's really cold there, and there's no air. But leaving those things aside, we're just growing at such a rate that you just couldn't commission enough nuclear power plants. You couldn't put enough solar capacity online. We're going to just run out of power. And of course, we won't really run out of power. We'll plateau before we get there. Now, lots of things will happen. You could have, like a bluebird kind of, new energy technology. Maybe that could happen. But in the meantime, as we sort that out, and we haven't really shown that we're very good at sorting those things out, we would argue that this is actually a great case where the negative externality of all the things that are bad about using too much energy, fossil fuels, all that, are actually pretty well aligned with the cost. It's really expensive to use a lot of power. Like when we do data centers, we don't have conversations about, the hard, like how do we get the hardware? Actually, we do with NVIDIA. It's very expensive and the supply chain is limited. But it's not about the data center or the space. It's about how many megawatts can we pull. So we have to like pull in new power, and that costs a lot of money. So for this to be cost effective, it's really advantageous to trim your models down, to develop new technologies like we've done in Granite to make them run faster, more efficiently. They're snappier if they're small and light and fast. So we're really trying to just pack as much capability into a small package as possible. And the field as a whole, we're able to, every 6 to 9 months, we're able to take whatever a 100 billion parameter model is able to do and put it in a 50 billion parameter model. 6 to 9 months later, we figure out how to put it into a 25, and then sort of down the line. So I think we're driving towards a world where it isn't just all about we create this one big, Rocco's Basilisk style, super intelligence, but we actually build things that we can run everywhere. You can run them on your phones increasingly, which is also really exciting. Better for privacy, better for ubiquity of the technology.
That's cool. So you talk about scale and sustainability as well with these new power sources. Can we have them both, or do we have to make some hard choices?
That's a great question. We humans are not good at making hard choices and trade-offs, I think, in general. But I think we can have our cake and eat it too, right? Like as long as we're matching what we want to do to the cost, the energy that it warrants, as long as we put that energy into making those things possible, as long as we put the investments into the hardware to make the hardware more efficient, I don't think we have to have trade-offs. I think we can all enjoy the benefits of this technology. And I think it's really important that we all enjoy the benefits of this technology, that it doesn't become a haves and have-nots kind of situation, that this really can augment us, that we get, all of us have like a say in where this field goes. Because I do think it's important. I think it's transformative.
So we're in a session that's beyond the model, rethinking AI's next frontier. What do you think happens with LLMs? Do you think they become just software modules? Do they become different?
Yeah, so many things will happen with LLMs, right? It's a little bit like asking what will happen with electricity. I mean, in those early days, hard to say what was going to happen with electricity, but it became the foundation for lots of different things. Our take on a big part of what we're working on is that it changes how we do software. But there's 2 ways that could happen. One way is that it writes the software for us. And if you've heard, how many people have heard of vibe coding?
Everyone.
Yeah, so that's just like I'm just letting the LLM kind of do my job for me, kind of roughly speaking. And the code, I've seen it. It's not amazing. I used to be a computer science professor. I'm not amused sometimes by the vibe coding software. But there's another version of this. I mean, maybe it'll get good enough and we'll just all stop doing that. But there's another version of this where it just changes how we do software. Like we can do things now that we couldn't do before. Like, I don't know how to write this function. Nobody knows how to write this function to do this one particular operation. I can just have an LLM, stand in for that piece. We can now have, wonderful, fluid, natural language interfaces with things that we didn't know how to do that before. And I think it's really has the potential, and we're pushing on this thread to just become a new pillar of computer science, rather than becoming, a god or an idol over here that we talk to and get the answers from. It's a new pillar of how we do software, and I think that's going to be really exciting. What does an algorithm look like in this new world? How does this fill the gaps that we had before? How does it make our lives easier and make things more predictable when we want to build software? Because one of the secrets, maybe a dirty secret of this field, is that it's actually really hard to get these things to do what you want them to do. It's actually really frustrating as a developer. We've had developers threaten to quit because there's this thing called prompt engineering you have to do, where you're talking to a model. It could be, doesn't matter what model you're using, open model, proprietary model. You write this prompt, which is kind of like this set of instructions. It's kind of like an essay. And you have to just kind of fiddle with it, because sometimes it just doesn't do what you want it to do. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. You kind of jumble it around. And people are building software on this basis. And I think we're going to move to a world where the predictability of being able to do the thing you want to do, to not have it be a huge burden, not to slow everything down, that's going to become more and more important. So I think in some ways it's even more profound than having a superintelligence, that we change how we do everything we do.
That's really cool. So before we close off, I'm doing this quick round. I put out a word, or 1, 2 words, and you give me the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Ready? Hallucinations.
Bullshitting.
Waymo.
Waymo. Pretty good.
NVIDIA.
Money.
Tesla.
Shame.
Agentic AI.
Microservices.
$100 million bonuses.
Yes. Please.
And finally, hard fork.
Hats.
David, thank you so much.
It was
We're
a
out
great
of
pleasure.
time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.